Hi guys, it's Reagan and welcome back to another video. Today's video is 2022's Final TBR. I honestly cannot believe we have 1 month left, but I'm also really excited to say I am so close to hitting 100 books read for the year that I'm really trying to stay focused. With that in mind, I'm honestly so excited about my own TBR, so without further ado, let's go ahead and dive right in. The first book I'm going to be chatting about is actually from this video's sponsor, which is Get Underlined. The book I'm showing off is the first book on my TBR and a very exciting new release. And that book is 5 Survive by Holly Jackson, the same author who brought us A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. I'm so thrilled to have this in my hand. It's honestly the perfect release to end out the year with, especially with me trying to hit that 100 books read goal, because this is a fast read and I know I'll be able to breeze right through it. And the concept and the tagline of this book immediately hooked me. It says, 8 hours, 6 friends, 5 survive. Personally, I love a thriller setup where we know something terrible happens, some sort of closed door, intense situation where someone doesn't make it out, but we don't know who it happens to or everything that unraveled to get us there in the first place, turning perhaps close friendships into really toxic situations that just makes it impossible to put down. And that is definitely the recipe found in 5 Survive. And in this story, we follow our main character, Red, and Red is on a road trip with her brother, his perfect girlfriend, her best friend, a friend from school, and a person she wishes is more than friend. But their RV will not make it to their final destination. In the midst of their trip, their RV breaks down in the middle of nowhere. There's no cell service. It's completely pitch black. And they all realize that someone out there in the dark has trapped all of them there together, and one of them is being hunted. With 8 hours until dawn, these 6 friends have to work together to try to escape and also try to figure out, is one of them a liar? Are they involved in this situation? Who is actually being targeted amongst their group? Secrets begin to reveal themselves, tension begins to rise, and the situation in the RV begins to reach very deadly levels. Again, this sounds like an absolutely captivating read, a perfect book to propel your TBR to the end of the year. And again, it's just recently come out into stores. If y'all want to click the link below, you'll be able to learn more about this book and figure out your closest bookstore to be able to pick it up. This is the first book on my TBR and I am thrilled. Pretty much the rest of the books on my list are predominantly fantasy. I have a mix of YA, middle grade, and adult fantasy. Something about the holidays just really makes me only want to read like classic adventure stories, cozy reads, intense reads. I just personally cannot get enough. The first book that is on my list is Age of Swords by Michael J. Sullivan. This is book 2, the first one being The Age of Myth, which I read a few months ago and loved. This is a new fantasy series that really, I feel like, has an opportunity to become one of my new all-time favorites. It has everything I love in fantasy, and I also feel so nostalgic while reading it because it's truly a classic setup that I cannot get enough of. I loved book 1 and I need to know what happens next. This, I want to say, is a 6-book fantasy series set in a very pastoral fantasy landscape. In this world, there are humans, and there's also this other group of individuals called the Freya. Humans for generations have actually worshipped the Freya as gods, and this is pretty logical because if you look at them, they live for thousands of years. They are faster and stronger than the average human. They also have magical power, pretty much indestructible in battle. They are not gods though. They're just a really arrogant and pompous group of people. At the beginning of book 1 though, everything sort of turned upside down when one of our main characters actually kills one of these Freyja, killing one of the gods, which was until this point thought to be impossible. This results in a more complicated political situation where the Freyja are trying to decide what they want to do against humanity, and a group of humans have kind of come together. This is a multi-POV tale, and I would say the first one is a really slow build, but I think it works wonderfully. We are really like dealing with like small scale politics in one human village, but we feel this like looming presence of this larger conflict that's on the way. I loved the characters. I loved the setting. I truly was hooked from beginning to end, and again, it just made me feel like so nostalgic. So needless to say, I'm picking up book 2. I also feel strongly that this is going to be a fantasy series I will be marathoning over the next few months. Next up, I have a new release I'm dying to pick up, and that is Amari and the Great Game by B.B. Alston. This is book 2 to a middle grade series that has absolutely delighted me. I'm really craving middle grade this month, and I feel like this is going to perfectly fit the bill because book 1 in this series is one of my favorite middle grade books books of all time. It has it all, truly. But in this story, we follow our main character, Amari. And Amari never stopped believing that her older brother, Quentin, is still alive, despite what everyone tries to tell her. At the beginning of book 1, she stumbles across a very mysterious briefcase in her brother's closet and opens it up. And inside, she discovers an invitation to the Bureau of Supernatural Affairs. Thinking that this is a sign from her brother, she accepts, and her life is completely turned upside down. When she arrives at this bureau, she realizes that supernatural creatures, magic, basically folklore and mythology has been alive and around us all along, and this particular bureau is tasked with basically protecting humans and managing all of these different magical things. The larger discovery is that Quentin, her older brother, actually one of the bureau's most successful agents, but he is tragically gone missing. From there, we follow our main character Amari as she begins her training within this institution and also try to become an agent herself in hopes of saving her brother. This book is full of magic and adventure, fantastic characters, fantastic friendship, and also a very intense plot, such whimsical magic, just everything you would want in a middle grade, this has. I loved book 1. I can't wait to check out book 2. Next up, I have some lyrical, kind of fairy tale-esque fantasy stories that I feel like will be perfect for the season, especially like cozied up next to a fire. I'm visiting my mom and she lives in a very cold place, so I'm definitely planning on bringing these along. The first is The Buried Giant by Kazuo Ishiguro. This is a book I've had on my TBR for so long, and I've also had it on a few TBRs this year, but I'm really hoping I get to it this month because I honestly feel like this is a perfect Christmas read. This is like a true quest fantasy story. It seems strange and unusual, and this story is set on the British Isle after the Roman Empire has left, but it's also kind of falling into decay, into ruin. We follow an elderly couple who basically goes out on a quest to try to locate their lost son, and on this quest they have to encounter all different types of obstacles and overcome all sorts of different things. Again, it really gives the feeling of like a very classic and lush quest story, which I always love so much. I also am a big fan of this writer, and I feel like this will just be beautiful. It's not too long. Again, I'm trying to read some shorter books, which I feel like I did a bad job making that TBR, but you know, I tried my best here. Next up, I also have Child of the Prophecy by Juliette Marillier. This is a series I started this year, and I'm really wanting to get to the third book in this series. I always thought this was a trilogy, but turns out there's actually, I think, 6 books in this world. Nevertheless, I loved the first 2, so I want to make sure to continue on and check out the third book before the end of the year. Juliette Marillier's writing is truly a gift. It's stunning, it's lush, it's full of landscape and nature. It's also just completely transporting, and I feel like a perfect kind of holiday cozy read as well. The series has honestly been a ride since book 1. They're incredibly emotional, following and centering different main characters in each installments, all from the same Seven Waters clan. It very much gives like cottagecore fantasy vibes, but I really want to say like these are actually rather dark. In each of these books, you're following a different female protagonist, and you watch her kind of come into her magic, come into her power, and have to go out on a very perilous journey to save the ones that she loves most. The first 2 books were amazing. I have a strong feeling I will love the third one just as much. These are just delightful. It's just my kind of fantasy, very old school, and I'm just craving that right now so much. Next up, I have a couple very plot-forward books. I actually have a sci-fi on this TBR, and that is Nemesis Games by James S.A. Corey. I read the 4th book of the Expanse series in November, flew through it, loved it, and I really want to carry on that momentum into the month of December as well. This series has honestly been a joy to pick up. Each book has been explosive, interesting, dynamic, just so hard to put down, which is again exactly what I'm craving right now. And I also feel like I am far enough in the series where I can begin the show, which I'm really looking forward to. The overall setting of the series is that we're in space and humanity has kind of expanded upon the reaches of Earth, and they have settled into governments on Mars, a series of space stations called the Belt, and governments there have formed independently, and there's actually a lot of conflict between all of these governments. At the beginning of book 1, tensions are incredibly high, and we follow one of our main characters, Jim Holden, who basically stumbles upon a piece of alien technology, which acts as the spark to kind of set off a variety of events. The great thing about this series, though, is while we do follow Jim Holden and his crew through each book also presents us with an entirely new cast of characters, an entirely new location, like different plot points and angles that we're kind of absorbing this fantasy world in. The stakes are continually like risen, also absorbing these stakes and this series from so many different points of view. reviews really just keeping it fresh and super entertaining. Hence why I just really want to go ahead and jump into book 5 right away, and I truly cannot wait to pick it up. And everyone just keeps telling me that they get better and better, and I just truly do not know how James S.A. Corey continues to do it. But I can't wait to find out. Next up, I also want to pick up Alloy of Law by Brandon Sanderson. Brandon Sanderson just released a new book, The Lost Metal, in this series, and it's been kind of a long time since I read the first 3 books, so I thought it might be a good idea to reread them. They're all pretty short and, again, super plot forward and just very, very engaging. I just want to go into the new release with all of the information very top of mind. I also feel like this shorter book will be perfect for kind of adding a few books to my read pile before the end of the year. But if you're not familiar, the Alloy of Law series is Mistborn Era 2. Caution to say, if this sounds interesting to you, you do need to read Mistborn Era 1 first, the first one being The Final Empire. Lucky for you, those books are truly incredible and probably my favorite so far of the 2 eras, but they are incredibly different. Era 2 follows an entirely different cast of characters. It's very much like Flintlock fantasy and Wild Wild West vibes. We follow 2 characters who are sort of traversing this landscape and solving crimes. Everything escalates so much though, like where you're at in book 1 and into the actual trilogy of Era 2 is truly bonkers, which is why I'm just excited to enjoy it all again from beginning to end. The magic system in this world is so cool. It's all about metals and the consumption of metals, and it's just ingenious. Obviously, I'm a big Brandon Sanderson stan, though I honestly just thought it'd be so fun to give this series a reread. Next up, I have a couple books that I want to read to wrap up a few series I've open-ended from this year. The first is Blood of Dragons by Robin Hobb. This is the 4th and final book to the Rain Wild Chronicles, which I really want to get to in December because obviously, one, I love Robin Hobb. Robin Hobb is one of my favorite fantasy authors of all time, but I really want to stay on track because in the next year, I want to start the final series within the Robin Hobb universe, which honestly pains me to say. I'm so sad I'm coming up on the end, but I'm also so excited to see how that trilogy particularly wraps up. That being said though, the Rain Wild Chronicles is the 4th series within the Robin Hobb world, and it's also one I've really enjoyed. It's very character focused while also giving us a lot of context and background to this fantasy world, especially as it relates to the history and sort of some ancient elements, which has been great. Robin Hobb, in my opinion, is really known for her character, really creating very emotional and troubling situations that you have to watch these characters sort of work through. This series is honestly very hard to describe without accidentally spoiling the previous works, but I would say this is a series of outcasts. You're following a group of people who are kind of venturing out on an excursion in hopes of, sure, uncovering elements of the past, but also trying to find a place for themselves. So in exploring wild places, danger both from the environment, but also within a small group can obviously rise, and that is definitely a large part of this book too. First 3 books were very engaging, and I have fallen in love with pretty much all of the characters present, well, the ones that you're supposed to like anyway, and I'm looking forward to see how the 4th and final book is going to wrap up. Next up, I also have Muse of Nightmares by Laini Taylor, the book that has kind of haunted me for the past 5 years. It's honestly shocking I have not gotten to this book yet. I actually reread Strange the Dreamer at the end of last year, so I would be able to easily move into reading Muse of Nightmares at some point in 2022, and here we are in December and I have not read it yet. I'm going to say it's because it's so good and so emotional, I'm scared it's going to break me. And you know what? We're just gonna run with that narrative. But nevertheless, I'm reading this book this month. This is one of the first books I'm going to pick up because I cannot end this year without having read this. Luckily though, I feel like this is going to be fantastic. Strange the Dreamer was one of the best books I read the first and second time I picked it up. It was just emotional and beautiful, filled with Laini Taylor's incredible writing. This is a duology and also a dual perspective story. In book 1, we're introduced to one of our main characters named Laszlo Strange. Laszlo is a librarian, but he's also a dreamer. And he dreams of one day visiting a place that is his obsession, and that is the city of Weep. By day, he works in the libraries, but by night, he intensely studies and tries to find any scrap of information about this lost city, so lost that even the name itself is gone. One day, though, his dreams might come true when an envoy actually arrives from the lost city of Weep, kind of collecting experts in a variety of different fields to help them with their own problems in their town. Laszlo departs with his envoy, arrives there, and Laszlo begins to realize that the problem is much larger than he could have ever realized. This book is emotional, it's beautiful, it's haunting, has elements of generational and community pain, grieving and forgiving, and just there's just so much happening within Strange the Dreamer. I also know that Muse of Nightmares is going to be even more like emotionally tumultuous, but honestly, I can't wait. And this is a book I cannot put off any longer. It's going to happen. I also hear the audiobook is amazing, which I might listen to as well, but we will see. Next up, I wanted another charming middle grade series, so I've decided to read The Mysterious Benedict Society by Trenton Lee Stewart. This was also recently, sort of recently, adapted into a television show on Disney Plus, which I'm curious about, so I wanted to read the book first before diving into the TV show. But truthfully, this just seems like a strange and quirky middle grade book, which I always just tend to love so much. In this story, an ad is put in the paper basically looking for dozens of children to enroll to take a series of mysterious and mind-bending tests. You, dear reader, can test your wits right alongside them, but in the end, only 4 very special children are chosen, and they're sent off on a very secret mission. This is book 1 to a 6-book series. I think I've read this first one like many years ago, but I honestly don't remember anything at all. I feel like this would be a great kind of holiday read, something really charming and lighthearted. That's why I want to read both this and Amari Cooper this month. I'm just really craving middle grade. And the last book that's on my TBR is my only literary fiction select for the month, and that is A Gentleman in Moscow by Amari. This is a historical literary fiction story that I feel like is just really up my alley. It sounds super character driven, also set in a time period that I'm personally really interested in. And in this story, we follow our main character, who is a count. And at the beginning of this book, he is basically deemed by the new Bolshevik government to be an unrepentant aristocrat. Therefore, he has been sentenced to house arrest for the entirety of the rest of his life. From there, we follow him from his top floor apartment in a hotel, which is also right across the street from a very important government building. And he basically is writing down his thoughts on life, the government, and kind of watching some of the most significant years of Russian history, of 20th century history, sort of pass before his eyes. This book, though, again, is very character focused because it also is about the relationships that he creates with other members that live in this hotel. And I've honestly only heard amazing things about this book, and I've owned it again for years. I also feel like given the setting, this would make a perfect winter read. If I don't read it this month, definitely January, but I'm also going to try my best. Alrighty guys, those are all the books I hope to read in the month of December, my final TBR of 2022. Please let me know down below some books you hope to get to before the clock strikes midnight, as I would love to know. And again, big shout out to this video's sponsor, which is Get Underlined. If you want to learn more about 5 Survive, again, it'll be linked in my description box. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you soon with another video soon. Goodbye.